Greetings, citizens of Nerdtropolis. Sean Tajipour, the Mayor of Nerdtropolis, and my guest today is Alex Winter, who you know from the Bill and Ted movies and The Lost Boys, who talks to us today about his documentary, The YouTube Effect.
Hey, Alex, I'm super excited to talk to you today. I really appreciate the time.
Sure, man. Yeah, it's good to be here. It's good to be chatting this movie.
Yeah, for sure. And I must say, I've been a longtime fan of all your work, and I just wanted to take the time right now to say thank you for all the years of entertainment.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Hopefully there will be some more in front of me.
Yeah, for sure. And your latest documentary is The YouTube Effect. And I wanted to know, first off, what initially drew you to the world of documentary making and what keeps you passionate about it?
I think I'm interested in people. I think it's what drew me to, film and acting in the first place when I was young. Kind of, not to sound heady, but things like the human condition, being alive and on this planet all together, trying to figure it out for ourselves. So I think that acting and documentary filmmaking have a lot of similarities to me. So it's a kind of a different branch than the other narrative work that I do, where I'm really telling stories with people and character that are real and that are dealing with some kind of urgent issue. I tend to be interested in documentaries that deal with kind of big topical or current issues that are thorny and paradoxical, contradictory, difficult. So that keeps me inspired.
Yeah, you're super passionate about documentaries and the YouTube effect. It delves into the impact of YouTube on our lives. What inspired you to explore this topic, and what message you hope to convey to your audience through this documentary?
I think that I've been interested in the rise of online community for a very long time, going back to the 80s. And my first doc was about Napster, which was the first large-scale internet community. I think that's what made it important more than anything else, including the music stuff. So YouTube is, without peer, by far the largest community on the internet that connects together. Google is the number one searched website on the planet. YouTube is the number two, but YouTube actually functions not only as information and search and video and all of the recorded history of mankind, but it also works as a social media community as well. So that seemed like a very important thing to look at, and I didn't really see anyone else looking at it in that way. Gail Ann Hurd, the great producer who's made a lot of movies I'm sure you're very well aware of, came to me about collaborating on this with her, and I was very eager to do it. It felt like a good time to jump into looking at Google.
Yeah, and so what does the YouTube search history look like on Alex Winter's computer? What do you like watching on YouTube?
YouTube is so vast. I think that it would be a large history. I think it would be everything from movies that you can't find anywhere else. I mean, a lot of the great movies are on YouTube, going back to the silent era, the beginning of movies. So when I'm looking for a film, if I'm writing about film or I'm researching, my first stop is YouTube. So it's an indispensable resource for finding the greatest films and films that you really can't find anywhere else, including on other major platforms like Criterion or Canopy or Mubi or whatever. So that's a big one for me. I'm in the documentary space, so research is really our primary job day in, day out. And YouTube is our first port of call because it's where you find most of the initial threads of a sweater that you're looking to go down, if not many of them, no matter what the topic is. But then look, man, I'm a clunky old guy. If I can't figure out how to get the batteries into my Oculus, then my first port of call is YouTube. And I find that, like, with my Oculus handset, no matter how many times I put the batteries in it, I forget how to open that thing every single time. And I go crawling back to YouTube like some kind of old boomer, looking for a video on how to get my damn batteries into the Oculus handset. Why do they make it so difficult? What's wrong with them? It's a conspiracy.
I have an Oculus as well, and I actually have a charging dock adapter, so you can actually get a plate for it, so you don't have to change the batteries and just put it on the charging dock. But what do you like
for the handset?
Yeah, for the headset or for both?
No, for the handset. Okay,
yeah, for the handset.
That's easy. Right.
Yeah, the handset they have that too. It's actually really cool, and it just takes place of the batteries you got to change out, and it charges it for you. But what do you do on the Oculus, since you mentioned it?
Everything. it's been a slow roll for VR, despite the promise of revolution that was made to us years ago. But I've got three boys, so it's always being used by one of them for something. And then I find it really interesting for kind of experiential ways into film, because there's a lot of people doing stuff in the film and art and even journalism space with VR. Nani Pena and other people I can think of have done extraordinary things with journalism that put you into like the front lines of certain wars or major issues that are going on around the world. VR is a very immersive way into those stories. And I find it really interesting, and I think has a lot of potential. I also really love Trip, the meditation app, which is on VR, which I find, of all, they can be very gimmicky and kind of useless. And I think that one is neither of those things. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I think VR right now is very good also for indoor exercises. There's a lot of cool stuff happening with that as well. And as I can tell, you're passionate about VR. It seems like that's going to be your next documentary. It's talking about VR.
I don't know. I think VR, kind of like AI, is in its infancy. So I tend to wait a beat. It took there being 15, 16 years of YouTube before I wanted to look at YouTube. And I think that it's really early days for VR, and it's really early days for AI. AI would be potentially an area of interest for me for a documentary, but I just think we're so far away from knowing where it's really going.
No, that's very true. And YouTube has evolved significantly since its humble beginnings. Could you share some of the key moments or aspects of YouTube's journey that surprised you the most while making this documentary?
I think that you're always surprised by many, many things when you make a documentary. You don't go into a doc thinking you know all the answers. I think that for me, I go into a doc with a lot of questions, and I don't even expect those questions to get answered by the doc as much as more questions will be brought up. You asked me earlier what I want the audience to take away, and I think that with almost all my docs, it's the same. I want them to leave with more questions than they arrived with. I certainly don't want them to leave with all the answers. And so I think that on this one, there were a lot of big surprises. I think that I knew how big YouTube was, but the scale of it is kind of jaw-dropping. And the fact that it gets sort of dismissed as either a social media platform or like a kind of, the grandfather of things like TikTok, like a place to like for people to just share videos and things like that. It's so much more than that. And I think that the scale of it was really a jaw dropper for me. The fact that you have 4.5 billion views of videos every single day. It's just an astronomical amount of eyeballs on a platform that is giving you search and news and information and social media and videos and DIY and influencers and all of your entertainment and all of your music. So I think that the scale of it was every day I was on this movie, I was amazed by how big it was and how far its reach was and how much bigger it was than I thought. And I think the fact that it's really owned by Google and really run by Google and not so much its own separate company was news to me. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that was the case.
Were there any specific stories or individuals that left a lasting impression on you while making this?
All of them, I would say. I tend to be pretty choosy about who I put in my films. I don't want a kind of an assembly line of talking head experts, just one after the other, telling you their opinion. I tend to go after those experts in the background for my research, and then I focus on a core group of human beings that I'm interested in. So even on this film, I kept the experts off camera. They're all just voiceover, and the people who I focus on camera are really the ensemble. They're my cast. And I care very much about all of them. Caleb Kane, Natalie Wynn, Carrie Goldberg, Brianna Wu. Everyone that we see in the film are people that I care very much about. Andy Parker. So these are people I've stayed very much in contact with since we've shot the film, and their journey through YouTube and in life in response to the impact YouTube has had on them is very interesting and can be quite dramatic.
Yeah, a lot of good faces, a lot of good stories, the ones we put on camera talking about, what YouTube has meant to them and just kind of their world. As a documentary filmmaker, what challenges did you face delving into the vast and complex landscape of YouTube and its influence?
The challenges I faced were similar to the challenges I had on Zappa, the doc I made a couple of years ago, where we had access to all of Zappa's life history and archives, which were vast and endless. Like that room, the rooms that stored it were like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? It was just floor to ceiling as far as you could see. And digitally, YouTube is the same. YouTube, when we started documentary, we put our research team on pulling all the media they can that's pertinent. Well, in the case of YouTube, that's literally all of recorded human history. It's literally everything that's ever existed that's visual is on YouTube. So it's endless. It's an infinite amount of data and content, and or near infinite. So it was, incumbent upon me, like it is on all of these documentaries, to figure out what my story was. And once I figured the story out, it frankly becomes much easier to put my arms around and kind of bookend the narrative and not feel like I'm overwhelmed by information. And it becomes much easier to get rid of stuff and just dump stuff off the boat and just say, this isn't pertinent. And it's a really small boat, like, right. It's like a dinghy, right? It's not a cruise ship. I make these hopefully very concise features. It's not a 10-part series. You got to get in, you got to get out, tell your story. So a lot of stuff gets thrown off the boat. And a lot of good stuff gets thrown off the boat, but we're pretty merciless about that.
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, YouTube has given a voice to the individuals and communities out there, but it's also faced criticism for amplifying some of the harmful ideologies. What steps do you think platforms like YouTube can take to address these issues effectively?
I think that it's challenging. I think that the world that we live in is challenging right now. And I think that these technologies have grown much faster than anyone expected, and that they're much bigger. And I think that Google, while any company wants to grow and get big and be profitable, I think Google has become bigger than it expected in terms of its reach and impact. So I think that, to be fair to them, there's a lot of incredibly smart people working across the span of Google and YouTube who are very eager to figure this out. And I think that to some degree they are shackled or handcuffed by the way their business model works, which is it's an ad-based model, which means they're monetizing, keeping eyeballs on the platform. And the good news is that there's a lot of really great stuff on the platform, and there's a lot of really beneficial stuff on the platform. But because it's so big, there's also a lot of harmful stuff on the platform. So I think getting better at figuring out content moderation, which they can be good at and bad at. They can be incentivized to do and not incentivized to do, meaning if they pull certain things down, they'll make less money. And it's hard to go to your shareholders or your board and say, we're going to be less profitable this year because we got rid of some really terrible stuff that was making a lot of money. So I think that there's some inner conflicts that have to get worked out there. I also think that there are some regulations that need to be imposed. It's very odd to have a platform that is basically like every radio station, every TV station, every record company that has no standards and practices, laws, or rules in place. And when you think about that, it's really bananas that we've allowed these companies, these monopolies, to grow without any oversight. It's crazy. We would never do that to the automotive industry or the oil industry or the railroad or any other major industry. And yet that's what we're doing with big tech, which is crazy. So that obviously needs to change.
Yeah, I feel like the internet, it's still the wild, wild west out there.
Yeah, it's not the Wild West, right? It's the Wild West and East and Midwest and all the foreign countries. So it's as if you took the Wild West and you made up the entire planet Earth. That's where we are.
That's where WWW stands for the Wild West world.
That's great. I think you coined something. Make sure you trademark that as soon as you jump off the call. I'm going to.
Go ahead. That's all yours, Alex. That is all yours. You can go for it, man. As a filmmaker, how do you see the role of documentaries in fostering awareness and encouraging positive change?
I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, as people like to say. Gail Ann Hurd loves to say that. I love hearing her say that. She's right. I think that when I make these films, I don't have an expectation that I'm going to change policy, right? I don't have the kind of hubris to think that I am personally going to change the world. But I do think that that when you tell human stories, which is what documentaries are, and they're definitely what my documentaries are, they're not info dumps. They're about people, and they're about usually a very small cast of characters. Putting a face to these stories creates emotion, and I think emotion is very impactful. And we've had an amazing response to the film so far from people of all ages. Much younger people are responding to this film than I expected, and they're having an emotional response to the film, and that's really what you can hope for. And I think that stirs something in people to want to be part of what's going on and be part of enacting change. So, my hope with my docs is that I help activate people in ways that I don't even know about. They're just off there doing their thing.
Yeah, one last question. How do you see the future of online video platforms like YouTube?
Well, YouTube is really in a class all by itself. So I think some are going to come and go. I think sort of your Twitters, your TikToks are going to come and go. But I think something like YouTube is and even to a degree Meta, Facebook and Meta are really juggernauts that are not going to go. They have a foothold, sort of a monopolized foothold in the industry, and I don't think they're going to do anything but grow. So I think that honestly, YouTube will get bigger and bigger over the next 10 years, and it will really require some regulation imposed on it to make sure it's safer and has some guardrails.
Yeah, and The YouTube Effect is a great documentary. What's the best way people can watch this?
Well, on August 8th, we will be on digital all over the place. So you'll be able to see it there in almost most territories in the world, English speaking anyway. And we'll be rolling out shortly after in all worldwide territories. So it'll be very easy to see. And they can always go to any of my social media handles or alexwinter.com. And we'll have very clear places for things to be seen there.
Yeah, really eye-opening documentary. The YouTube Effect is a must-watch. Thank you, Alex Winter. It was great talking to you for sure. And hopefully we got to talk again soon.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Once again, this is Sean Taj, the mayor of Nerdtropolis, and stay tuned for more movie news, reviews, interviews, and trailers.